Hi, I'm Daisy,
Hi, I'm David.
and we're the MSA Crusaders. Hello, and welcome to our third episode of MSA Crusaders. It's Daisy here again with David and Carolyn. Miss Carolyn, to start out, can you tell us a little bit about your loved one's life before getting diagnosed with multiple system atrophy, like their name and what their occupation was?
Sure. My husband's name is Fred, and he was a highway patrol officer for 30 years. He was retired at the time he got diagnosed, but he was also very busy in the community with Rotary and children's charities and nonprofits, volunteering for the Agricultural Association, riding motorcycles, camping, traveling, cruising. We were very, very busy.
Well, it's very difficult to diagnose MSA at an early stage. Was Fred diagnosed with something different before he was diagnosed with MSA?
Diagnosed with Parkinson's initially.
Parkinson's, right? So was that from a neurologist and then you went to a movement disorder neurologist?
Well, it's actually very interesting. He was on a motorcycle trip with, he belongs to or belonged to a group of motorcycle riders who were current or former law enforcement officers. He actually drove instead of taking his motorcycle because he was having issues. And one of the wives is a nurse practitioner, and she was the one that suspected he might have Parkinson's and recommended that he see his primary care physician to get a referral to a neurologist. She suspected Parkinson's. She was absolutely right. We did see a neurologist who then diagnosed the Parkinson's.
Was this a spur of the moment thing? Like, hey, he's shaking not because of a motorcycle, but or was this something like he had been complaining before, or maybe mentioned something, or was this like something just completely off the cuff that she noticed?
Well, she noticed that when he walked, he shuffled his feet and that he leaned to one side, significantly leaned to one side. Unfortunately, it was a trip that I wasn't able to go on with him. So she called me and recommended that I get him to a neurologist pretty quickly. And when I asked her why she thought he had Parkinson's, her comments were really centered around his feet shuffling and his balance issues.
So I know MSA is known for its progressive nature. Could you describe how the disease affected your loved one's life and when he was diagnosed with MSA?
The diagnosis of MSA, I don't know that it ever takes a typical path, but ours was a little different from what I understand other paths were. As soon as he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, I started doing research on Parkinson's because I wanted to know what we were in for. I went to the Mayo Clinic website, the Michael J. Fox website, and what I was seeing on those websites were similar to what I saw my husband was experiencing, but different. And so I contacted his neurologist and started asking a lot of questions. And one of the message boards on the Michael J. Fox site, someone had said, hey, I'm not going to be part of this site anymore because my husband doesn't have Parkinson's. He's got multiple symptom atrophy. I had no idea what that was. I had never heard of it before. So I started doing research on that. Again, went to the Mayo website, and there was a list of common things that you see in people with MSA. And my husband had almost every single one on the list.
Now, when you're talking about the other symptoms besides the Parkinsonisms or more broadly defined, but like, are you talking autonomic, like problems with, heart, blood pressure, circulation, things like that, or just strictly Parkinson's symptoms?
The autonomic symptoms that you typically don't see in Parkinson's.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of symptoms did he have?
He had already been being treated for years for high blood pressure, but all of a sudden his blood pressure was very, very low. He difficulty reading because he couldn't track a line of text. His eye muscles weren't functioning the way they always had, and he was an avid reader. He was, in fact, at the CHP Academy, he taught report writing, and his writing was very odd. He started having cognitive issues. Couldn't remember what day it was. Would ask me the same question over and over and over again. He was having bowel issues and bladder issues. He was having balance issues, but balance issues that were different from typical Parkinson's issues.
Right.
He couldn't bend over, for example, to pick up the newspaper off the driveway. He would continue to fall forward.
Yeah, the big difference from Parkinson's and MSA is Parkinson's is they will have postural instability. Usually what that goes down to is the neck going really far forward, or like a hunchback or Notre Dame type of postures. But you don't have the type of falling that you see from MSA patients. Yeah, completely different. Now, you mentioned he was diagnosed before in 2013 and passed in September 20th, 2018, which was about 5 years. How much time before his diagnosis do you think these symptoms were there for?
My guess is about 5 to 10 years. We didn't attribute them to anything other than he was aging.
Right. How old was he in 2018? How old was he when he passed for MSA?
75.
75. So if you take 5 back to 70, 5 more years after that, 65, you would have to expect that, age, like you said, aging, getting older, our bodies start to break down from natural causes and things. And
knowing that you're going to lose him to this disease before he died, how did you and Fred approach discussions about end-of-life decisions and end-of-life care decisions?
It was very difficult. It's difficult conversations anyway. Fred had a lot of cognitive issues that came along with his MSA. And although the neurologist had a very frank conversation with him and told him that he did in fact have MSA, that it was incurable, that he was not going to survive it, within an hour of leaving the doctor's office, he's talking about, what he's going to do when he gets better. He could not remember that the disease was fatal.
So he wasn't cognitive enough to make end-of-life decisions.
Interestingly, by the time we reached a point where his doctor recommended palliative care and then ultimately hospice care, it's at that point that he said that maybe he needs to think about what he wants end-of-life care to look like. But that was only about a month before he passed.
Mm-hmm. He knew, he just couldn't connect the dots necessarily.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And you said earlier about he had bladder and bowel issues.
Oh, yes.
When it came to the bladder, was it like, did he have urgency issues and then retentive issues both, or just one?
Just the urgency issues.
I had urgency and retention, and so we're going to talk about it in another episode, but I got a suprapubic catheter.
He made the decision when we had the conversation with the neurologist, and the neurologist told him that he in fact had MSA and what the rest of his time was likely to look like. And he made the decision during that meeting that he wanted no interventions whatsoever, including a catheter. So he we dealt with it with depends. That was our only choice, really.
Well, that's a switch, right? As much as possible. I mean, I'm the same way with. I'm definitely not comparing to Fred, but I've been prescribed so many medicines for urinary, GI, everything under the sun so far, and I don't take. Hope the doctors aren't listening, but I don't take any except for a couple of Miraplex and stuff for trying to knock out other symptoms and tremors. But I don't want to be drugged up, and if I have to, that's a whole. I'm not even thinking about that point. Like Fred's like, I want to be me, and traveling around with this and that. It sucks. And if we can get away without it, and sometimes messy, but if I could do it, sure. Probably like Fred thought, But
I had that. Sounds like a balance. One day I would take Herbitric, and the next day I would take my my retention medicine. I had to alternate back and forth until it just quit. I couldn't do anything, so I had to start with catheter, and then I was getting UTI after UTI after UTI. So finally, I said, "Okay, let's go with the suprapubic catheter." Honestly, that's the most artificial I want to go.
Well, man, after that last kidney infection I had, I told my wife, I said, if I'm going to keep having these infections, and I would have to do something similar like Daisy, what that road you're down yourself, because that's as Fred would find out too. That's catastrophic to keep having those UTIs over and over and over. They're deadly. They're deadly.
Absolutely.
Since January, every UA has been UTI until just last week. I finally got one that was no bacteria. So it's like, yes, thank you.
Well, you're getting. We talked about off camera, but you talked. PT's helping out too, so maybe getting better.
True. Okay, I know grief is a complex and individual journey. How did you cope with the loss of Fred, and were there any support system or resources that helped you during that time?
I pride myself on being a very strong, organized, coordinated person. I did not handle grief well. I will be the first to admit that I did not handle it well. And I say that because I didn't reach out for help, and I should have. I should have. I eventually did, but I was in crisis by the time I did, and I should have. I have 5 brothers and sisters, and I'm the middle child, and I'm the one that when there's a problem, they come to me and I help them solve it. I was a problem solver at work. That was my job. I'm a problem solver with my kids, because that's what you do as a parent. And I thought I could handle this, right? I knew for 5 years that he was going to pass. He didn't, thank God, experience a lot of the issues that many MSA patients experience at the end of life. He could still eat. He could still drink. He could still verbalize. So I felt very fortunate, and I thought, I knew this was coming. I'm prepared. I can handle this. The truth is, I could not. I tried for a very long time.
Did you deny it, you think?
No, I wasn't denying it, and I wasn't angry at anyone, at him or at doctors. He had wonderful medical care. I was just lost. It had been Fred and Carolyn for so many years, and we did pretty much everything together. And those last 5 years, my life was structured around making sure he got his medication on time, getting him to doctors, making sure that we were available for occupational therapy that was coming to the house. My job was trying to make what time he had left as good for him as possible. And then all of a sudden he's gone. And I don't know. I didn't take the time to think about what life was going to be like once he was gone. And I had great support network around me that I pushed away because I thought I could handle it. I didn't need the help. And I guess if I had advice for someone else in that same position, it would be if someone offers you support and help, take it. Even if you don't think you need it, take it.
Can I just add, having Parkinson's, while tragic, completely tragic as well, right? And no, by no means am I trying to compare and contrast anything. Parkinson's people generally live for decade, 20, 30. And Michael J. Fox is an example of the longevity of things.
Right.
Exactly.
The astrophysicist Stephen Hawking with ALS since he was a kid, which is just a phenomenon. We grow old and we die in a very predictable way. I mean, there are some tragic accidents. There's automobile accidents and roller coaster accidents. There's some freak accidents nonetheless. But I think a point that really ties in with what you're talking about now is getting help early, at least at some time, because this MSA twists and turns. It's not like anything we've seen. I mean, you don't meet anybody else with MSA in your life for the most part, 99% of the time, right? I know plenty of people with Parkinson's. My wife's good uncle, I believe, has young onset Parkinson's. And I'm looking at him like nothing like me. Like he's still doing really well, and I'm over here progressing down. But there's nobody to look in the mirror. There's no one at church. There's no one at school. The Lake County's offices, to look and say, oh, that's what I could expect, because it doesn't happen that way. And we're like, oh, okay. In the back of our mind, we're like, it's okay. But
I know it's not really.
Yeah, it's quite different how these things progress,
It is. And I again, that 2020 hindsight, I realized that because on the same day that we got the at least the initial diagnosis and started down this path, our son died. And I didn't really have time to grieve that until after my husband died.
You have to grieve two at one time.
Exactly. And I didn't realize that because my husband was so fragile after our son died and after getting this diagnosis that I'm supporting him and trying to uphold him and trying to get him, through day one and day two, that I put that grief on hold. Like I did grieve, but not to the degree that a parent should be grieving.
Yeah.
Because I had this full plate. And then once my husband died, not only do I have that loss,
but your son
grief, but then, and it just, they talk about grief coming in waves. I had tsunamis.
Yeah, you did.
I can't even imagine.
No, me either.
I did, when I finally did reach out after I had a crisis, I was diagnosed with complex grief syndrome, anxiety disorder, depression.
Of course, how you couldn't be.
I was able to connect with a wonderful therapist. And although, of course, I still struggle, grief is not a linear path, just like MSA is not a linear path.
It still comes in waves.
The journey has been not at all what I expected. Not at all.
Well, all things considered, losing a child, immediately a diagnosis of your husband, I think you did beyond well. I mean, there's how many times you hear stories of husbands, wives leaving each other because of sickness and death, right? Things our vows. I'm torn in my heart, but I'm looking at you and listening to. I'm like, you're still here. You did everything you could, right? You did the time. You can't control what you can't control, but you know what? You did the best you could, and that's really the only thing that matters.
Well, and I think I've come to a place, really, just in the last year, where I give myself some grace.
Mm-hmm.
I cut myself a lot more slack than I used to. I remind myself that in the last 10 years, 5 years of his death, and then the 5 years following, it's been a tough journey, and I'm still here. And there were days when that was really going to be questionable, but I'm still here, and I am a lot nicer to myself than I used to be.
Good. Because you're human.
You deserve it too, that's for sure.
It turns out I can't control everything.
No.
And
Don't
everything
try to.
doesn't have to be perfect.
There you go.
Exactly.
Wise words. So, what are some of the most fondest or cherished memories you've had with Fred? Really, before the diagnosis is great too, but and also during the journey with MSA.
I think probably my most cherished memories of him post MSA was one of his exercises that he had to do for swallowing and for his voice was to sing. And my husband was a wonderful singer. He was in the church choir. He was a singer in high school. He and his sister used to perform together at nightclubs before they were old enough to get into nightclubs in high school. So he would sing, and he did a dead-on Willie Nelson impression, and he would sing to me.
Well, he camps. He rides motorcycles. He's a trooper. He's like literally a trooper and a trooper. He's a husband, a father. He sings.
Singer.
What Carolyn, what else can you pull out the bag here? And I feel kind of jealous, and like I'm not living up to my wife's expectations at this point.
Oh, I'm sure that you are. But he would sing. We would be getting ready for a trip, and he would be singing while I'm loading the camper or I'm loading the truck. He'd be singing on the road again.
Oh, that's the best song ever. Oh, best song.
Yeah.
I love this guy already.
Yeah, he didn't let MSA destroy everything. He found the light in the darkness, and that made it so much easier for me because we didn't always have to worry about MSA. We could have fun too.
Mm-hmm. Well, was it easy or difficult to transition after Fred had passed from MSA? Was it easy to transition back to normal life, or was it? I know we struggled with what we talked about a minute ago, but physically, was it easy to carry on? Like, hey, just not that he's a burden, but the burden's off of me with caring for my sick husband, or was it? Obviously, we still wish Fred was around. Was it easy for you, or was it very difficult?
It was extremely difficult.
Mm-hmm.
He was on some time release medications, and it took me a very long time to stop looking at the clock to see if it was time for his meds, because he took them every 2 hours, 24 hours a day. So I had an alarm clock that I was getting in the middle of the night. It took me probably 3 years before I was sleeping well through the night because I was so used to listening for him. And I was so used to getting up to check on him and to make sure that he had his medication or help him to the bathroom. I don't know still, 5 years later, I don't know what normal is. I'm still trying to figure out my new normal. It's taken me a long time to figure out that I have to create that is not just going to happen organically. Mm-hmm. I have to figure out what the new normal is going to be.
That's to make your own path, right? That's
exactly. Yeah. And I still don't know what that looks like, but I will figure it out. I just haven't figured it out yet.
So looking back on the entire years and situation with MSA and Fred, what message of hope or resilience would you give to somebody else who, another wife, it could be husbands as well, somebody who's in the same boat with you, what word of advice, or if you had to tell somebody one thing, just to give them a heads up, what would you tell that person?
I think I would tell them that, there are a lot of well-meaning people who want to help. And it's okay if the kind of help they're offering is not the kind of help that you need. It's okay to say, that's not the help that I need. It's okay to ask for the kind of help that you need. It's hard to ask for help when you're the person who feels like you're responsible for the well-being of another human being.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard because you have this sense of loss of control if you let someone in to help.
But do it.
Absolutely. What things I wish I had allowed my friends to help with would have been grocery shopping, laundry, yard work, running errands. And I thought I could do it all. And all that did was lead to exhaustion.
Exactly. You got to take care of yourself in order to take care of somebody. You're not taking care of yourself if you don't take a break and rest yourself up.
Exactly. The one thing that used to drive me crazy when I was caring for Fred was constantly being told that I need to practice self-care, but no one ever defined what that was.
Mm-hmm.
What does that, in practice, what does that look like? Like, you can't go to the spa for the day because you have this responsibility. You can't always, pile in the car with your girlfriends and go spend the night at a wine bar because
Right.
you have
responsibilities.
Yeah. So what does self-care look like?
So they say in the professional world, regrets are unprofessional. But that's not here right now. So if you had one regret of something you didn't do or should have done, like self-help, we talk about therapists or getting help that we've all done. What's one thing, if you can go back and change, you would?
I would have had more patience with Fred. When Fred would forget that he had to wear Depends. So he'd go to the bathroom and then forget to put the Depends back on. And then we'd have a mess. Or Fred kept insisting that he could drive and would try to go drive. And I would, it would reach a point where I would lose my patience. I got so tired of telling him, no, you can't. And there were times when I lost my patience. And I know I was exhausted. I know I was really tired. And I give myself grace around that. But that's my regret, is I wish I had had more patience with him.
Yeah, well, especially with cognitive degeneration, unfortunately, you have to be a certain type of way to get the point across when we're losing our frontal lobe cortex and stuff like that. So I wouldn't completely feel bad for yourself. That's just, you gotta get the message across somehow, some way, right?
And some of it was safety issues. Like, there was no way he could drive.
No.
Because he spent his career as a highway patrolman telling people how they should or shouldn't drive.
Right. Well, Carolyn, we would really like to thank you for coming and joining us today on MSA Crusaders. You've given us and our listeners a lot to think about, for sure.
Thank you for inviting me.
We definitely appreciate the advice and the memories of Fred, and the honesty that you spoke about. That's that's what this is about, is openness, love, and being honest for those of us that have had and will get and currently have MSA. So yes, we definitely thank you for being part of the podcast, Carolyn.
You are an MSA Crusaders with the caretakers because you are, and thank you for everything you did, and we really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. You guys take care.
Thank you, Carolyn.